Who were you before the world told you who you should be? That's the question I ask every listener and every future guest who's going to walk through these doors. But after recording the very first episode of this podcast, I realized something. I've never really answered it myself, not completely, and definitely not honestly enough. I think it's easier to ask other people to be vulnerable. It's a whole lot harder when you're the one sitting in the hot seat. So I figured it's only fair that I go first. So today's guest is me. And if you're anything like me, you might already be thinking, oh, great, she's about to trauma dump for an hour. I promise it's not what this is. This isn't a story about the worst things that have ever happened to me. That'll be a different episode. This is a story about the best decision I ever made, choosing to finally live life for myself. So, welcome back to Becoming Bella Badass. I'm your host, Bella Badass, and today I'm putting myself before everyone else. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to give a quick disclaimer. Today's conversation includes topics like addiction, suicidal thoughts, medical trauma, mental health, and grief. Some parts of my story may be difficult to hear. I'm not sharing them because I'm looking for sympathy, and I'm definitely not sharing them because I think my pain is bigger than anyone else's. I'm sharing them because for a really long time, I thought I was the only person who felt the way that I did. If even one person listens to this episode and realizes they're not alone, then every uncomfortable conversation I'm about to have is worth it. And I also want to say this. Everything you're about to hear is from my personal experience. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, and nothing I say today should replace professional medical or mental health care. If this episode brings something up for you, I hope you'll give yourself permission to reach out to someone you trust. I know asking for help can feel impossible. I also know it can save your life. Okay, now let's have the conversation I've been avoiding for 27 years. It's funny. I've spent years trying to figure out where my story begins. For a long time, I thought it began in a hospital. I thought it began with a surgery that almost killed me. I thought it began with addiction or heartbreak or trauma, but I don't think that's true anymore. I think my story began the very first time someone made me believe that I wasn't enough. And maybe it was when I was little, but this is about my adult years. If you would have met me when I was 18, you probably would have underestimated me. And honestly, I probably would have underestimated me too. I wasn't the loudest person in the room. I wasn't the girl who thought she had everything she wanted and everything figured out. I wasn't even somebody who believed she had much of a future. I was shy, I was insensitive, even though you'd probably never guess that when you meet me today. And I've always had a really dark sense of humor. I joke about things that most people wouldn't dare to joke about. Not because I don't care, but because sometimes humor is the only way I know how to survive. I've seen things that honestly most people my age have only ever seen in movies or read about in the local papers. And when you've seen enough darkness, you learn to either let it consume you or learn to laugh while you're walking through it. And I chose to laugh while I walked through it. I've never really been good at pretending life is perfect, and I don't think I ever will be. That's probably why you're here. When I was younger, a lot of people had already decided who they thought I was. I was a high school dropout, I was a badass, and not in a good way. And for some people, that was enough. They had already written the ending of my story. She'll never amount to anything. She's wasting her life. She's too young. She doesn't know what she's doing. And the scary part is, after hearing those things enough, I started believing them too. I don't I don't think people realize how powerful words are, and I didn't, because I even have said things about people that I truly didn't mean. I just said in a spot of anger. But especially when they're spoken over someone who's still trying to figure out who they are. So every time someone told me I wasn't enough, I worked harder. I tried to prove myself. I chased approval. I chased success. I chased being enough in a room full of people that are no longer here. And do you know what I learned? You can spend your entire life trying to prove something to people who made up their minds about you before they even knew you. And you'll never win because the goalpost just keeps moving. So if you were to ask 18-year-old Bella, who are you? She probably would have told you who everyone else thought she was, not who she actually was, because she didn't know. And I think a lot of us do that. We introduce ourselves with our jobs, our mistakes, our diagnoses, our relationship, our accomplishments, or our failures, as if those things are the same thing as who we are. And I think that's kind of bullshit because they're not. I just didn't know that yet. And then I started making some really bad decisions, not because I wanted to destroy my life, but because I didn't think that my life was worth protecting. And that changed everything. I've never shared this part of my story quite like this before. When I was younger, I used substances, and I want to be careful how I talk about that because this isn't a story about glorifying it. It's a story about surviving long enough to realize I wanted something different. When people hear that someone struggled with a substance issue, they usually ask why. And honestly, I don't think there's ever just one answer. I was hurting. I didn't think much of myself. I was trying to outrun my feelings I didn't know how to sit with. And for a little while, it just felt easier. And I felt like I actually had friends, and those people were not my friends. It's easier isn't the same thing as better. And I was about 19 years old when people around me started dying. Not celebrities, not strangers on the news, my friends, people I laughed with, people I cried with, people I knew, people who were supposed to grow up with me. And every funeral, every phone call, and every post that started with rest in peace felt like another piece of reality crashing down on me. What haunted me the most wasn't just that they were gone. It was what everyone said about them afterwards. He could have been a professional football player. She could have been an amazing mom. He had so much potential. She could have been anything that she wanted to be. And every single time I remember thinking, I don't want to become a she could have been. I want to become a she was. When I'm old and it's my time, I want people to say she lived, she loved people well. She took chances, she made mistakes, but she got back up. She became who she was meant to be, not because I planned on dying, but because I finally realized if I kept living the way I was living, I might never get the chance to find out who I was actually supposed to be. I wish I could tell you that I quit everything overnight, and from that moment on, I never struggled again. But that's not how healing worked for me. I still made those mistakes. I still reached for things that numbed me. I still had a lot of growing to do, but something inside me shifted. For the first time, I wasn't just trying to stay alive. I was starting to wonder what kind of life was actually worth living. And looking back, I think that's where this podcast was actually born. Not when I bought the microphone, not when I hit record, and definitely not when I came up with the name. I think the name hit me because of this exact thought. It was born in a 19-year-old girl standing in the middle of grief, quietly making herself a promise. I'm going to be worth I'm going to become someone worth remembering, not because I'm perfect, but because I refuse to let my story end before I ever learned who I was. And that promise led me somewhere I never expected. Every birthday, I'm just like, I cannot believe I'm here. And like, it sounds cliche, but like the life I was leading, I'm surprised every year. And that promise led me somewhere I never expected. And that promise sent me out into the world. You know what else is funny? For the longest time, I thought I found myself when I was traveling on the road. But looking back, I don't think that's true. I think the road was just the first time and the first place that showed me I might be more than the person that I believed I was. So when everything came crashing down, I packed up my life and I left. I left my family. I went states away on my own in my little Toyota Corolla, away from everything and everyone I knew, and put myself into the uncomfortable. And for the first time in my life, nobody knew my past. I wasn't the high school dropout. I wasn't the middle school bully. I wasn't the asshole. I wasn't the druggie that everyone wanted me to become. And I wasn't caring about people's opinions, and I wasn't carrying them around with me. I wasn't constantly trying to prove the people back home wrong. I was just me. And I think after a while, I realized that I didn't want to prove people wrong. I wanted to prove myself right, that I was going to be something. And all of that was both terrifying and incredibly freeing. I worked hard, really hard, and there were days I was exhausted. There were days I questioned what had I gotten myself into, and there were days that felt like I was living somebody's dream life. People would message me and be like, "Bella, I wish I had your life." And I'm like, dude, I'm grinding my fucking ass over here. I, but I'm doing it. But the thing is, I was drinking. I was living that life. I got to travel the country. I experienced cities I'd never seen. I tried foods I never tasted, and I met people from every walk of life, different cultures, different beliefs, and different stories. And somehow we all ended up becoming family. When you're on the road for weeks, sometimes months, those people become your home. We celebrated together. We sometimes we argued. We laughed until our stomachs hurt, and we blasted music way too loud in our cars in the parking lot. And sometimes we got in trouble, but we worked our asses off. And before you knew it, the project would end, and there we'd be hugging each other in a hotel parking lot, sometimes crying because we knew life was about to scatter us across the country again. Then we do it all over somewhere else, the same cycle. And that was a huge part of my life. I loved it. I loved the chaos of not knowing where I'd be at the end of the week, trying to figure out, hey, where are we going to be this week? And no one knew. And I even loved being told, Bella, you're in Texas today, but you need to be back on the East Coast in Chicago by Sunday. And it was so exhausting, but it was so exciting. It was unpredictable, but it was freedom. And it was the first freedom that I ever felt like I had. Somewhere along the way, people started believing in me. And I think that's why I'm crying. But not because of where I came from and not because of what I'd survived, but because the person standing in front of them, they trusted me. Oh, they respected me and they laughed with me and they depended on me. And for the first time, I started wondering maybe everyone who said I wouldn't amount to anything was wrong. And they were. They were definitely fucking wrong. Okay, pull it together. I had people my age who were in college messaging me saying they wished they had my life. But like I was hiding behind a bottle, but I was having fun. And it always made me laugh because for so many years I wished I had theirs. And perspective is funny like that. Looking back, I don't think it was the road who taught me who I was. I think it introduced me to the possibility that I might be more than the labels I'd been carrying around my whole life. It was the first time I believed I might be more. I need a second because but here's the thing. Believing you might be more isn't the same thing as believing you're worth choosing. I wasn't about to learn that lesson. I was about to learn that lesson in the hardest way imaginable. Life has a way of convincing you that you finally figured it out, and then it humbles you. I was finally becoming someone I was proud of. I loved my job. I loved the people. I loved the friends that I made. I loved being on the road, even though sometimes it got aggravating. And I loved waking up not knowing what state I'd be in a few days. I had momentum. And for the first time in a really long time, I wasn't trying to just survive. I was living. I was living. I was seeing things. And it felt like a dog whose head is out the window. But then my body started whispering to me. At first, it wasn't loud. It was little things, stomach pains, nausea. And then I'd start throwing up, feeling sick constantly. I kept telling myself it's probably nothing. Like I just probably have the flu and I'll push through it. I'll be okay. And I've always been really good at pushing through things, sometimes a little too good. But the whispers eventually became screams, and I kept getting sicker and sicker and sicker. There were days I couldn't function. There were days I questioned whether I was losing my mind because everyone just kept saying they couldn't find anything wrong. But when you know something is wrong and nobody can tell you what it is, you start questioning yourself. So it was like I was going in a repeated cycle over again, just with something different. I remember thinking, maybe this is just who I am now. And one by one, I'm going to start. The things I love started slipping away. I couldn't keep traveling. I had to leave the road. And if you've ever had to walk away from something you love, you know sometimes it feels like you're grieving someone who's still alive, which is something I mentioned before, but I hadn't really gone into detail. I lost the life that I worked so hard to build. I lost the routine. I lost the excitement. I felt like I was losing my friend. I lost the version of me that felt fearless. And eventually I lost even more. My relationship ended because I was so sick. I was toxic, and the toxicity was making me sick. He was toxic. I gave up my apartment. My independence disappeared. I crashed my car and I had no car, and my body didn't feel like it was mine anymore. And I remember looking around one day and thinking, who am I now? Because it's amazing how quickly we start confusing what we do with who we are. I wasn't the girl traveling the country anymore. I wasn't the leader that everyone around believed that I could be. I wasn't the independent 20 something chasing the next adventure. I was sick as fuck. And that word started swallowing everything else. And if I'm being honest, I don't think losing my health was the hardest part. I think the hardest part was feeling like I was losing myself, but not like years later, looking back, I didn't realize that everything I lost was because I needed a new foundation. My foundation was rocky as hell. And I spent years building that foundation, and that felt like it was disappearing. And no matter how hard I fought to hold on to it, my hands just kept coming back empty. And I had absolutely no idea that the hardest fight still hadn't even started. I replayed this part of my life thousands of times, and every time I wonder how close I actually came to never telling this story. And it wasn't until this story that really gave me my life back. That surgery, and like any other surgery, thinking that you'll recover, you're nervous. But then I woke up, and when you're something is wrong with your body, you know. I thought I'd recover and I'd get back to my life as it was. I thought I'd go back to the road and become her again and be her again. But that's not how it happened. And I think looking back, that was for a reason. When I woke up, something wasn't feeling right. And I wish I could explain that feeling. Like I was in panic. It wasn't anxiety. It was my body just saying, like, something's wrong. Something is really wrong. And sometimes the hardest things in the world is knowing your own body, because when everyone around you is telling you you're okay, which this the time I left the road to the time that they finally figured out was my gallbladder was a year and a half. For a year and a half, they kept telling me there was nothing wrong and I just needed to stop smoking tree and I'd be fine, but or I was hysteric. That one was what got me. That got me really pissed off. But and then they found out my gallbladder was fucked up. I get the surgery, so on and so forth. I've posted about it a lot. I'll post about it some more, but I'll never forget after I was home and my parents looked at me and they knew. They did not argue. They didn't wait. They got me in the car and took me somewhere else because the night before that they took me to a different hospital. The hospital sent me home and they were like, you have abdominal fluid in your stomach, like word for word. You have abdominal fluid in your stomach and just call your surgeon tomorrow. And he had a different story of what he said happened when they called him. Whatever, it's in the past. But I don't know where I'd be if they had threw me in that car. My lips, like I said last time, my lips were literally blue. My blood pressure was in the 200s over like some crazy 100 number. I can't remember. But everything changed. There was no waiting around. There wasn't anyone telling me to give it time. They moved and they moved fast because they looked at my CT before they let me in. Like in a hospital, they prioritize patients. And I know like my sister's in healthcare, so now I see both sides of it, but they prioritize no matter what age you are. And to me, pause. I was critically ill and I wasn't overreacting and I wasn't dramatic. They took me in there, they got me in a room, and they put me in the best part of the hospital because I was dying. And I don't remember every detail. Trauma has a funny way of protecting us, but there are moments I'll never forget. I remember the pain, I remember the fear, I remember wondering if my body was giving up. But I remember one moment years later that hit me harder than anything else. The day I was finally leaving the hospital, a nurse stopped me because I'm still in my head thinking, oh, like I'm just being dramatic because I was conditioned to feel that way. She said, I'm so happy I get to be the one who sees you leave. The night you came in, I honestly thought you were going to die. You were blue, you were pale, you were clammy, and all you could say was, please help me. You couldn't talk. And I didn't think you were going to make it that night. I was so scared. And I just stood there, high as hell on the pain medication. But I just stood there and I took that in because while I had lived through it, I never realized how close everyone else thought I came to losing my life. And that's something I've carried with me ever since. And people always ask me what it felt like to almost die. And there's no words that you can put to make someone understand that unless they lived it themselves. But that's not the question that changed my life. The question that changed my life was, what if I don't die? I just remember looking at myself from an outer body experience like, what if you don't die? You've spent all these years being suicidal, but what if you don't die? Like, what if you actually live for yourself? And when everything I built was gone and my body betrayed me, when I had every reason to give up, that realization, I didn't want to spend the rest of my life trying to become enough for everybody else. I wanted to live for me. And that was the first time in my life I ever felt like that. And that's the day I truly began becoming. So when I was 19, that was the little tick in my brain to start thinking about who I want to become. And then this day was the day I started becoming. And I wish I could tell you that after that day, I walked out of the hospital and suddenly everything makes sense. It didn't. Healing is messy, it's frustrating, it's lonely. Even if you have people around you, they're going through an opposite end of what you're going through. They're watching their family member fight, but you're going through it. And that's how I feel with these seizures too, because I'm sure people are struggling watching them happen, but like from my end, it's difficult too. And it feels like you take 5 steps forward just to take 10 steps back. And I'm still learning how to trust my body again, and I still had to grieve and let go of the life I thought I was going to have because it made me realize I wasn't going back. Like I can't, my body can't handle the road. And even though I literally was just thinking last week, like, hell yeah, let me go back on the road, but I can't. Like, and I'm still angry at what happened. I'm still angry at my body and I'm angry that I had to start over. But I think I'm finally making peace with it because now it's been almost 4.5 years since I've had to start over. And I really love who I'm becoming. And what it felt like everyone in my age range was moving forward. And then I felt like I just like took a leap backwards and not big dramatic movie worthy choices, but I had to start making different choices. Little ones, I started having to ask for help. And if you knew the old Bella, you'd know that was a really big deal. I stopped trying to carry everything by myself. I stopped picking up the bottle. I eventually stopped smoking. I'm a year smoke free. I still smoke a cigarette, but and I don't condone that, but I stopped pretending I was okay when I wasn't, even now. And slowly I started choosing myself, not in a fully selfish way, but in a way I think that you're allowed to be selfish because, oh my God, that was disgusting. I'm so sorry. But I couldn't spend my whole life pouring into everyone else anymore while completely abandoning the person who needed me most, which was me. And that's something that I always did. I was breaking my neck for everybody else. And in that hospital bed, when I said I'm living for me, I meant that shit. It took me a little while to figure it out, but I quit chasing approval. I quit trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided who I was. And that's when I became the motto of love me for who I am, hate me for who I'm not. I don't care either way because I'd rather be hated for who I am than try to make myself small and loved for someone who is is just made up. Like I'm not doing that. It takes too much energy. And every single time that little voice in my head whispered that I'm not enough, I got a little better at answering it, like respectfully, shut the fuck up. Seriously. Like it, and now like sometimes I body shame myself, but then I'm like, yo, it is what it is. You're a little fat. All right, but you're not doing shit about it, so accept it. Like until you start working out and going to the gym, accept the fuck what you look like. And I've learned to say something kind anyway. And if I doubt myself, I remind myself of every mountain I've already climbed. If I mess up, I own it and I apologize. I learn and I keep moving. And I also want to own something that I kind of touched in the beginning of this. I spent a lot of time talking about the ways life hurt me, and those things are real. But if this podcast is going to be honest, then it has to be honest all the way. I was, I hate this word bullied, but I got made fun of in middle school, and somewhere along the way, I became a bully too. And I'm not proud of that, and I'm not telling you this so you'll excuse it. I'm telling you because it's true. And sometimes pain has a way of turning you into something you're not because you want to make everyone else hurt just as bad as you. And I've had to make peace with the fact that I wasn't just the victim in my story, which I've always had peace with that. But there are chapters where I am the antagonist in someone else's story. And that is a hard thing to admit because we all want to believe we're the hero. But real growth starts the moment you're willing to tell the truth about yourself. So if you ask different people about me, so if you ask different people about me, you're probably going to hear completely different stories. Some people will tell you Bella is one of the most loyal people they've ever met, and I hope that's true. But others might tell you she was one of the cruelest people I have ever met. And you know what? I think you should believe both. My tongue is dry. Give me a sec. But people are allowed to tell the truth about the version of me they experience. And I'm allowed to tell the truth about the person I'm working to become every day. And I can't rewrite the chapters where I hurt people, but I can make damn sure I don't keep writing them. I'm still impatient sometimes, like more times than not. I still get angry, but I'm medicated, so more times than not. And I still have bad days where I still don't feel enough, but I can sit with it better now. And I'm starting to cry more than I'd like to admit. And I don't usually like, I just cried in the beginning of this, but it's because I'm actually like dealing with my shit instead of just shoving it down. And I'm still human. And I think that's the biggest difference between who I used to be and who I am now. I don't need to be perfect to believe that I'm worthy. I don't need everyone to understand me, to understand myself. Some things, one of my good friends told me years ago, he says some things aren't meant for you to understand. And that's another tick in my brain to remember. And I don't need to have every answer to keep becoming me. And a lot of people think confidence is walking into the room and believing you're the best person there. That's not confidence. I don't think that's what confidence is anymore. I think that's conceited. And I think confidence is walking into a room knowing exactly who you are and not needing anyone else to tell you. And I used to spend my life asking, do they believe in me? Like a little sad bitch. Like, do they believe me? I don't give a fuck anymore. Now I ask myself, do I believe in me? Because that's the most important thing to me. As long as I believe in me, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. And as long as you believe in you, you're going to keep going. But for the first time in my life, my answer is yes. I believe in me. I believe in me. I know I can do it. And it took years to get here. I almost died in 2023. It's 2026. Literally exactly 3 months later, or not 3 months, 3 years later. And I believe in me now. And I think that's great. And when I started recording this episode, I thought I was finally going to answer the question, who was Bella before the world told her who she should be? And maybe I did, at least maybe a little. But somewhere along the way, I realized something. This episode was never really about me. It was about us because every single person listening to this has a version of themselves that the world tried to convince wasn't enough. Maybe someone told you that you weren't smart enough, pretty enough, strong enough, successful enough, worthy enough. Maybe life happened. Maybe you made mistakes. Maybe mistakes were made against you. Maybe you carry guilt. Maybe you carry grief. Maybe you carry both. And maybe, just maybe, you've spent so long carrying those things that you've forgotten there's something you experience and not who you are. I opened today's episode by asking you, who were you before the world told you who you should be? And I don't know if there's a perfect answer. And I'm not even sure we're supposed to have one. But I do know this. The scared Bella, the insecure Bella, the girl who believed everyone else's opinions mattered Bella, the girl who made mistakes, the girl who struggled with addiction, And the woman who almost lost everything, the woman laying in that hospital bed, the woman learning to trust her own body again, the woman living with the functional seizures, and the woman sitting in front of this microphone today, they were never different people. They were all me. I just hadn't learned to love every version of her yet. And maybe that's what becoming really is. Not erasing your past, not pretending the hard chapters never happened, not waiting until you're perfectly healed, not waiting until you're perfectly healed, because that's a whole different thing. It's choosing over and over again to believe that you're still worth becoming. So if you're listening to this today, I'm so nasally because I was crying. My bad. Oh, I'm gonna need a tissue, but whatever. If you're grieving the person you thought you'd be, if you're rebuilding, if you're scared, if you're tired, if you're hanging on by a thread, I want you to hear this. You are not behind. You are not broken. And you are not disqualified from becoming. You don't have to have your whole life figured out. You just have to choose today and tomorrow. And you choose again. And the day after that, you choose again and again. That's becoming. And before I let you go, I want to leave you with one question. Not because I expect you to answer it today, but I want you to think about it. Think about it again, because I hope you'll keep coming back to it. Who were you before the world told you you should be? And maybe the better question is, who are you becoming now that you get to choose for yourself? Thank you for trusting me with my story. I promise I'll keep showing up honestly if you promise to keep showing up for yourself. My name is Bella. This has been Becoming Bella Badass 999, the podcast. And wherever you are on your journey, I'm really glad you're here. And I hope to see you in the next episode.